Final question for Mr. D'Souza. Let's do one more for Dinesh and one more for Christopher, and then we'll call it a night. Mr. D'Souza, you've written that atheism does not have much to offer in the way of consolation when one is suffering. But I'd like to go back to the basic question of Job. Why does the all-powerful God of the Jewish and the Christian scriptures allow suffering at all? Surely he could have come up with a better way to draw us to him.
This is maybe one of the oldest questions faced by believers. And as you note in the example of Job, the atheists often present the problem as though they invented it. But in fact, it's an ancient problem within the orbit of belief. Now look, the problem is only a problem if stated in a narrow way. God is compassionate. We've got suffering and injustice. Therefore, this God could not exist. Stated that way, the proposition cannot be disputed. But this is a proposition that relies on stating a theist or Christian premise and then refuting it. So you got to state the premise fully. The premise is not God in his compassion created a perfect world, but God is compassionate but also just. God created a universe, but he also created a universe according to law. And that is to say not only moral laws, but physical laws. Now, there is natural evil that results from physical laws. There's a drought, or there is a tsunami, and people are killed. The only way for those to be suspended would be for our universe not to operate according to physical laws, not to live in a lawful universe, which, by the way, would make science impossible. Second, moral evil. We are created with free will. And that means that people can do terrible things. Free will can be used well, or it can be used badly. The alternative for God would be to create automatons, which he didn't. It's not clear that would be a better world. So God didn't do the Holocaust. Hitler and his minions did. I think ultimately, as humans, we will never fully answer these problems. But I think you touched on something very important in the beginning where you said that while theism may not be able to fully explain evil, atheism offers absolutely no psychological or emotional compensation for it. If we face suffering, a mother or I as a father lose a child, I'm less concerned with why did that happen and more with how do I go on? How do I face this level of grief? In that, atheism has nothing to offer. Things happen. Too bad for you. We're all molecules. Get used to it. Religion offers hope. Listen, you lost a loved one, but that loved one is in the arms of God. You might see that loved one again. Call it wishful thinking if you will, but the point is neither of us knows if that's true. The bottom line of it is for the suffering mother, theism offers consolation, and atheism does not.
Thank you. Christopher, final question. Several queries along the same lines of this tonight here. Where does your morality originate? Why aren't the various massacres, holocausts, and genocide simply the process of natural selection? And on a parallel track, why do humans, from your interpretation, appeal to a sense of justice and fairness when, in fact, there are so very few, if any, examples of either in this world?
Did I not just do my stuff about the golden rule? Haven't I just, in fact, couldn't I have a question I haven't already answered? Or haven't you just answered 2 minutes ago? It seems like a waste of a question to make me go through all that again. In the meantime, I will just add that it's certainly true of religion that it offers consolation.
All right.
Can I then?
It does. It tells you all kinds of consoling things. There's no doubt about that.
You didn't do justice to the question. The question wasn't what do you believe. That's what you answered when you spoke about the golden rule. It asked what the source is.
That's what I was said.
We want to know your source. Your source seems to be your opinion. Well, what if my opinion is I would like to screw everybody unless they screw me first?
If you like, I'll remind you of what I said. I don't mind reminding you. I said it will not be found that there has ever been a human society where courage and strength and care for others is despised, where savagery, adultery, theft, perjury, and so on are thought of as morally neutral or not to be condemned. I'm sorry, I bore myself when I repeat. I'm very much afraid of boring other people if I do it.
Well, it may bore you, but it doesn't answer the question.
And I didn't say this is my
We
opinion.
still do not have a clue as to where your source is. It's
Sir,
your opinion.
I did not say that was my opinion. I said I don't think it will be found that there has ever been.
Yeah, that's a
such
non
society.
sequitur. You won't find a society that didn't have slavery. What's your argument? The ubiquity of a principle does not mean a thing.
Christopher, may I reformulate the question slightly and pose it to you in a way I think you'll find challenging?
More interesting, yes, maybe.
Okay. You said that the golden rule, this idea of reciprocity, this idea, for example, of extending respect to others is universal, and maybe it is. What I want to know is, what is its Darwinian explanation? In other words, I can understand why, as a mother might jump into a burning car to save her 2 children. They share her genes. She's got a genetic kinship. I can understand why a businessman might treat a customer well. He has a Machiavellian motive. He wants the customer to come back. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. But I don't understand why someone would get up and give their seat to a 75-year-old lady in a bus. I don't think the person doing that is hoping to get her seat next week. Why would you give blood? Why would a soldier die for his country? Why would somebody do something for total genetic strangers? This kind of goodness appears to have no Darwinian explanation. So what is it?
Well, actually, the Darwinian explanation isn't as bad as you might think. But by the way, Darwin doesn't say that evolution is a form of perfection. Natural selection is not at all a form it's a very crude form, if you like. Extremely crude form. It's not, by pointing out that it exists, we don't recommend it. We don't say it is the source of morality. It says these are the kinds of mammals and primates that you're dealing with. This is how they came to be. It was earlier absurdly suggested by somebody that God wouldn't create people who didn't care about them. Well, how does that work for sheep? How does that work for rats? How does that work for viruses? How did that work for dinosaurs? I think it's entirely thinkable that there could be a prime mover who didn't care about his creation. But I'm digressing from my point about, say, blood donation, which happens to be my favorite example, and when I was a socialist was my favorite example. How is it that the British National Health Service never runs out of blood, and never charges for it either, and never pays a donor to give it? How is it that people step forward and say, you can have a pint of mine for the general good? Well, one reason, if you want just to not get too moistly idealistic about it, is if you give a pint of blood, you aren't actually a pint short. The beauty of it is you give a pint and someone else gets it, but you haven't lost one, because you'll replenish it after a nice strong cup of tea, which they'll give you in the British National Health Service in the recovery room. So how nice. Someone else is a pint better off and you're not a pint worse off. I can't think of a better way of saying that human solidarity doesn't depend either on self-interest or on self-sacrifice, that it is a rational calculation. And we don't know quite why this is, but it is the case. Quite a lot of people, including those of us who have no belief in any supernatural power or creator, feel better. We benefit in this way. We feel better for having done it. We get pleasure from the thought of helping someone who can't do us a favor. It's called the gift relationship in the Great Socialist Statement by Professor Titmuss about the origins of the blood donor movement. It isn't a reciprocal, it isn't a quid pro quo, it's just in the general interest and you feel good about having done it. And furthermore, since you have to insist on, and I think rightly, the possibility that there's a rational self-interest involved, I happen to have an extremely rare blood group. And one day I'm going to need some blood. So it is in my interest that the blood banks be properly manned, properly staffed, and regularly replenished. Now, all of that, everything that I've just said, makes perfect sense to everyone, I presume. Not because it's me talking, but because I haven't left anything out, and it's its own explanation and its own justification. And it works without any divine intervention or prompting at all of any kind.